learn some things from that, as long as we learn to use them honorably. But this is a terribly important thing. By training, I am the kind of guy who loves to argue about everything. I am Monty Python argument clinic Q here. Right. It's not an argument, simple contradiction. Right, okay, so we can go on. So, it's very easy for me to get all excited about, ripping into an argument and tearing it up into tiny little pieces and all that. But it is also easy for a person who is good at that to just browbeat other people into agreeing with you. Yeah. If you're articulate, you have a wide vocabulary, you know some facts they don't know, it's easy to bulldoze a lot of people, not everybody, but enough that you can, plow your way through quite a lot of people. Not a good idea. There's a time and a place to take a stand and to dump the truck if necessary. If you've got a lot of evidence, sometimes there's a case where you'll have to do that. But a dear professor of mine when I was an undergraduate pulled me into his office one day, and he shut the door. He looked me in the eye. He said, "Tim, you are not obligated to tell everyone you meet everything you know." And I wondered, why is he saying that to me? Maybe I needed to learn that at that point in my life. I thought that was a gentle but very effective reminder that it's not all about impressing people with how much you know. If people need help, if they need help in discovering what's true, offer that to them, but never use the method of asking questions as an excuse just to lead people by the nose to some conclusion you want them to arrive at. If you're going to use these techniques, you have to have your own code of honor in the using of them. And what we've tried to illustrate time and time and time again is the Boghossian is using these techniques in dishonorable ways, defining himself into correctness. Didn't we learn in critical reasoning that that was not a legitimate way to end an argument, by defining yourself as being right? Yeah, that doesn't work so well. That's not appropriate. But if you're suave about it, you may persuade, confuse, and otherwise rope people into agreeing with you.
My final word on this would be that the Ephesians 4:15 says, "Speaking the truth with love, we will in all things grow up into Him." Speaking the truth with love with people who are doing damage, I think, could be, or no, it is very difficult. Loving your enemies is the highest and hardest calling that we have as Christians. If it's hard, just recognize, okay, it's hard. That's, it wasn't meant to be easy. Maybe instead of moving towards anger, move towards grief. Speaking the truth with grief in your heart for the delusion, the confusion, the pain, Boghossian has to know on some level that he's not reasoning well, even though he says he believes in it. And so we've been here talking about speaking the truth. We have not been personally encountering Peter Boghossian. I would hope, and this is not easy, this is by the power and grace of God through His Holy Spirit, I would hope that I would speak the truth in love with him, patience, and maybe even with appropriate grief.
Which is compatible with a bit of humor now and then too, so that's okay.
Right.
Can we just open this up now and see if any of you have any questions about this or anything yet?
Can we see a role play of a good example of encountering a street epistemologist?
I don't know if you can or not. I've never tried it.
So instead of being
you did one earlier.
The hapless Christian,
right?
You want me to be the non-hapless?
Not the prepared Christian.
Yeah.
This is
just not you, Tim.
this is unrehearsed.
Yeah.
But
okay.
we could give it a shot. Yeah. So go ahead, Pete.
No, why don't you ask me how I know Jesus walked on
Yeah,
water?
so, I'm interested in all that. I know you're a Christian, and I'd just like to know, so, you think Jesus walked on water?
I think so, yes. Yeah.
So, why do you think that Jesus walked on water? Why would you believe that?
Why
I'm
would
just
I
curious.
believe
I'm
that?
just trying to figure this out.
Well, do you believe that the core of the earth is made of molten iron and nickel?
Sure.
Why?
Well, there's scientific tests that show that shock waves would pass through a solid, but when there are earthquakes on the other side of the earth, we can't measure with seismographs. So we've
right.
got the scientific evidence.
So how do you know that?
Read scientific journals and papers
Okay.
and talked to some people.
So basically, you might say that you know it on the basis of credible authority.
Yeah.
Someone you trust, someone
Yeah.
who knows. That's really my answer to my question of how I know Jesus walked on water. Because I have no direct evidence that Jesus walked on water. I don't have a video recording of it any more than you have a sample that you dug down 4,000 miles to get. But I think I have credible authorities, people that are trustworthy, who have been trustworthy on other topics, and they have said it, and because they've been trustworthy on so many other things, and I don't think they have reason to lie on this, then I think that that I've got justification for believing that Jesus walked on water.
So, okay, that's an interesting answer. So when we're looking at scientific reports, we've got things where we can have people go and redo experiments,
Sure.
and we understand some of the physics behind that.
Mhm.
And so that's how we can tell that these reports are credible. So what kind of cross-checks are there for, I assume you're saying that it's the Bible that's your credible source for this. So what kind of cross-checks help you to understand why that should be reliable?
Well, there's a whole list of them, and I could talk about other internal evidence for the Bible in the amazing. Well, I'm not going to go into this. That's the other talk I almost gave here tonight. There are external evidences for for example, there are dozens and dozens of points in in corroborated history for what Luke wrote in the Gospel of Luke and in Acts, which he also wrote. So we see from that he's a reliable historian. Can I just interrupt you for a second? Sure.
Because I'm still trying
Yeah.
to understand
Okay.
where you're coming from. So you say there are all these points, and okay, so maybe there are, but when I pick up a novel like War and Peace,
Mhm.
there are a lot of historical points that you could look at, right? Yeah, there is such a city as Paris, and yes,
Sure.
there were these armies at this place at this time. So you would agree, though, that doesn't make War and Peace a book of history.
Right.
And if War and Peace said that at one point Adolf Hitler flapped his arms and flew around the room and turned himself into a donkey and then back into a guy,
Right.
that you would believe
Sure.
that, right?
No, I would not go with that. You're
Okay, so why should the mere fact that there are some correct things in the Gospels, why should that lend credibility to the idea that some guy walked on water?
Well, we have to look at it in terms of a large-scale cumulative case, and it's really difficult to do as while we're here descending into the airport at Kalamazoo. But I'm trying to give myself a Saved by the Bell moment here. But War and Peace doesn't purport to be all true. The Bible does affirm that certain things happen, so it claims to be, among other things, something like biography, something like history, in the sense that it's claiming to be true. Now, the authors of the accounts that we have gave testimony that it was true, and they stood for that testimony at the cost of their lives.
Well, now, I'm not sure that's true, Mr. Christian, because, there's every liar who tells a lie, you have his word for it that he's telling you the truth.
Right.
And besides, Bart Ehrman says we don't even know who wrote the Gospels. They're not the people whose names are on them. So, a whole bit about their, being willing to die for. Well, we don't even know who these guys were.
Are you familiar with the term the argumentum ad Fragenblitzen?
No.
Fragen is German for questions. Blitzen is something like blitzkrieg. It's the argument by multiplying question after question after question. And you're just kind of walking towards it by asking me 2 questions at once, and not letting me answer the first one before you moved into the second one. So, that's a good one, by the way. It's a great one on the internet. Argumentum ad Fragenblitzen. Now, I'm getting out of character here, but my German teacher said, "You sollst nicht zwei Languages zusammenputten," which means you shouldn't put 2 languages together, and argumentum ad Fragenblitzen is a violation of that. But anyway.
Yeah, let me just time out here. Do you see what's happening in our little engagement? As he's giving reasonable answers and pushing me to engage with facts, I'm starting to fight dirty. I'm starting to try to hit him with a bunch of things all at once, hopefully create some fog.
Mm-hmm.
I may be the one who needs to retreat in the fog, but that's because Tom's actually giving reasonable answers that are directing us back toward facts. And remember, one of the key principles of street epistemology is avoid facts. So instead of challenging his facts now, I'm trying to toss a bunch of confusing stuff at him to try to make him maybe lose the thread or something like that. But the very fact that I'm doing that, when we stop and we analyze it, and we say, hey, that's what's going on here, is itself an indication that I'm aware I'm kind of losing control of this conversation.
Also, did you notice the first thing I did when he asked me a question? I asked him a question.
And it was a good one, and a well thought out, well prepared one, because what you did was you forced me to acknowledge that I believe a lot of things on testimonial evidence and have to judge the credibility of my sources.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So that was your little bit of it.
Good acting.
Thank you.
More questions. Any questions you like? Joel, go.
So you guys discussed the 2 definitions that Boghossian offers for faith,
Right.
and how he sort of defines himself into correctness. So in a discussion with somebody, say I'm offered this challenge that faith is just pretending to know things that I really don't know. And I respond by saying, well, I think that maybe you've defined yourself into correctness. Could I, let's say I begin to say, could I offer you what I think is a better understanding of faith as understood by historic Christians?
I think that's an excellent idea. Let me just suggest that you read the chapter David Marshall and I wrote in True Reason, because that's the whole burden of that.
Okay.
Is to do that with lots of historical references.
Well,
You could also ask them how they came to the conclusion that that's the definition.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard tactic, because I just want to get into answering it, so having to ask a question is...
Questions are better than answers.
Learn to do it.
In a lot of cases.
Yes.
Learn to do it. It's
Yes.
very effective.
Yeah.
Right. So my question then for you guys is, and of course this is going to be something you touched on in the chapter, what is an appropriate response, or what are a few different ways of defining faith that are true and meaningful to historic Christianity?
Right. Let me just start by observing this. If you look through the New Testament, in fact, through the whole of Scripture, and you look at cases where faith is discussed or described, you will find that it is never opposed to reason, but it is frequently opposed to sight. We walk by faith, not by sight. You may know something on the basis of evidence that is not visible to your senses at this moment. It may be something about the future. It may be something about the past, right? I've never seen Abraham Lincoln. I don't have sight of him, but I believe many things about him. But it's more than that, because there are a lot of facts in history that I just don't care about, right? What's the average length of a sergeant's shoelaces after basic training? I don't care. There's some fact of the matter, and I don't even care.